Elly. Today I'm going to read a story called Mr. Simon's Special Christmas. Are you ready to listen? Okay, I'm going to read you the story. Mr. Simon's Special Christmas. It was Christmas Eve. Mr. Simon stood in the pigeon house at the top of the highest tower in the castle. He looked out over the valley and watched people setting off through the storm. Like every year, the people who lived nearby were going to visit their families for Christmas. Mr. Simon tried to guess what was in their baskets. He imagined the wonderful dishes. They had prepared for Christmas. Mr. Simon loved good food, but sadly, he didn't know how to cook. So that evening he was planning to open a tin of peas with ham, just like every evening. The storm was getting worse and it was beginning to snow. Mr. Simon left the pigeon house and went down to check the fire in the big kitchen. Suddenly, knock, knock, knock. Someone was banging on the door. Mr. Simon was surprised. He wasn't expecting any visitors, but he went to open the door. An icy wind came rushing into the castle. Snow blew in Mr. Simon's face. He could just make out 4 shivering fingers. He said, "Goodness me, come in, quick," then shut the door in a hurry. 2 children and their parents stood in the hallway in their coats and scarves. The father explained, "We can't carry on this storm. Can we stay the night with you?" "Goodness me," said Mr. Simon. "My old castle is cold and dusty, and I don't have any beds." The father said, "Please, it is so cold outside. Our children, Anthony and Anna, are exhausted." So Mr. Simon agreed to let them stay. Suddenly there was another knock at the door. It was Mrs. Lewis and her son Angus, also looking for a place to shelter. Mr. Simon had just closed the door again when there was another knock. It was Tim and Lucy. Then the big Farrell family arrived, followed by Mr. and Mrs. Story and their 2 daughters. What a lot of people! That night, everybody would have to stay at Mr. Simon's castle. Everyone gathered into the big castle kitchen. The guests who took off their wet coats and shoes and socks and sat by the fire to get warm. Mr. Simon said, "I'm sorry, my castle is very big, but because I live alone, I only heat the kitchen. Goodness me, I have nothing to offer you for dinner. I've only got ham and peas." Little Anthony said, "Peas? I love peas." Everybody laughed. Little Anthony took a big golden cake out of her mother's basket and said, "This can be our dessert." Then all the guests opened their baskets. Mrs. Lewis took out a chocolate mousse. Tim had a ham. The Farrell family had vegetables. Mr. Story had 5 tasty cheeses. And Louis had some delicious creamy desserts. Mr. Simon couldn't believe his eyes. Everybody sat around the big table. Mr. Simon was very happy. He had never had so much good meal, and in such a good company too. He wanted the dinner to last all night long, but suddenly little Anthony looked sad. He whispered in Mr. Simon's ear, "How will Father Christmas find us here?" "Goodness me, that's a good question," said Mr. Simon. He scratched his chin and thought about it. Then he said, "I think I have an idea." Mr. Simon took little Anthony in hand. Together they walked through some dark, empty rooms, and until they got to the main staircase. They climbed up the top of the highest tower in the castle, as far as the pigeon house. Mr. Simon took a piece of paper and a pencil out of his dressing gown pocket, and he scribbled a long message and attached it to the leg of the beautiful gray-blue pigeon. Mr. Simon looked at Anthony and said, "Freddie is the most amazing carrier pigeon. He'll make sure Father Christmas finds you all." He kisses the pigeon and let him fly by the snow. When it was bedtime, Mr. Simon got lots of cushions and blankets. Everyone settled down on the floor around the fireplace. Before going to sleep, little Anthony whispered, "Can we come back and celebrate Christmas with you next year?" Mr. Simon smiled and said, "Goodness me, yes, it will be my pleasure." Soon all the guests were asleep. Mr. Simon stayed Mr. Simon stayed awake that night. He was having his home full of people, and he wanted to make sure that Father Christmas didn't forget anyone. The end. And thank you for listening to my story. Bye.